Welcome to The Growth Agenda, a sales and marketing podcast presented by Kvadrant Consulting. In this podcast, we explore how commercial leaders can provide new answers to the old question, where will growth come from? We hope you enjoy today's episode.
Welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
And Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much.
Are you doing anything special? Are you staying in Sweden? Are you going abroad?
Well, actually, isn't that a wonderful question? I'm here in Copenhagen.
Yes.
And tomorrow we're going to sail from Helsingborg to Copenhagen.
Okay.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah. I hear that in the Nyhavn Canal you have these kayaks and there are festivities and so on. But we're actually sailing with a 54-feeter. Very cool. It's a bit crazy.
Is that because you're into sailing, your family?
I'm a keen sailor.
Nice.
And I love actually Icelandic horses as well.
Yeah.
Isn't that odd?
That is a little bit strange.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have the same in here. There's one of our colleagues, Leonie. She's an avid sailor.
Yeah.
So whenever she does job interviews, when people are interviewing for here and she's in them, if someone says, I like sailing too, and she says, what kind of sailor are you?
Right.
Is it like motor or not motor?
Yeah.
And then she judges them by what they answer.
I don't. I say everything that floats is fine.
That's fine.
Okay, I'm fine with that, all right? So I'm very open-minded.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come here.
My
Matt.
pleasure. Thank you.
We
for
feel
inviting
really
me.
honored because we've read a lot of your stuff. Obviously, Jeppe knows you quite well from having been at Lund, and we just think it's really exciting to have you here with a lot of the stuff you're writing. And maybe for those that are not familiar with you, a quick introduction, perhaps, like. Who are you? Your background?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So, my name Mats Urde, and I'm associate professor at Lund University. I have 2 master courses, and Jeppe, you have been to those courses. If I may say so, one of our finest students here. Thank you very much. And then I'm much into case-based teaching and learning. I'm the coach of the Swedish team to a big case competition in Montreal. I'm off now in January. So, and then research. That's half of my time because I spend half my time in university, and then the other half of my time I do executive programs. I do my consultancy and brand strategy. So brand strategy is really my topic. And I've already mentioned that I like sailing and Icelandic horses. I did that.
And I think I must say, having been a student of yours at Lund, obviously, Mats, the fact that you were doing both the consulting and coaching piece and the case-based teaching was, for me, just a complete reframe of what can teaching be and how fun can it be, and also how much can you actually learn about practical, real-world applicable stuff. Yeah. That was really a game changer for me. How did you come across, or how come you started doing case-based teaching as opposed to what everybody else does?
Well, all right. So that's, yes, it's an amazing story. Going back, I think, 17 years, I was at a conference in London. A very fancy one, very cool, everything. And then I met a professor, Professor Gracier from Harvard Business School. And I also got to know a professor called Barmer. And I had this crazy project. Believe it or not, hold on, buckle up. Because I had the week before I went to the conference, I had a phone call. And I had been interviewed by Sweden Television about what is the value of the monarchy. And I have to say that,
I've often thought about that too.
Yeah, okay. So I'm not suicidal. So I said, okay. They asked me to be on TV, and I said, no, thank you, but I might comment upon it. And then they started about figures, how much is the apanage and all that. And I kind of avoided that question because I said, well, if you look at it, you might look at it more like a symbol for the nation. And it's about values. And maybe we can even think about it as a brand. And that was basically my comment, right? And then a week later, I had this phone call, and I looked, and I kind of recognized the voice. I never met the person, but this was the Iron Lady from the palace. At least that was her voice. Maybe I thought this was a prank call because I have.
How am I getting scammed?
Right,
now?
right. So, and she said, well, there are people here at the palace that found your comments to be quite interesting. Would you have time to come to Stockholm? And I said, try to remain serious because who knows it might be the real thing. And I said, certainly. And it was the real thing.
Oh, wow.
That's right. It was a wow. And then I was at the conference in London. And then what happened was, and this is very unfortunate, because I was presenting. And then during my presentation, I saw the blue light, like Blues Brothers. I see the light. And I said, I know exactly. Because I could put together a team of researchers, Baumer from UK, Gracier from the States, and then a Swede. And then we became the Three Musketeers.
Incredible.
Yeah, and that is a long answer to a short question. But then I got to know Harvard Business School. I've been working with them for a long time. I saw how they were teaching, and I said, okay, now I'm going to take a strategic decision. I'm going all in case-based. That's the story. That's the story.
Based on what I've heard from Jeppe, seems like a good choice.
Well, it is a bit what you said, Jeppe. It's like the bridging of theory and practice. It's also something that is right now in our world where everything goes digital, where everything goes remote, where AI is coming big time. I think this is probably one of the few occasions where we just talk, discuss, and reason together. We solve things together, right? And this is luxury. I love it.
Super nice. Well, we want to try and make the most out of this time we have with you. And one of the main reasons that Jeppe and I are doing this podcast is because there's a lot of stuff we're curious about.
Right.
So a lot of the people we get in, either they work for a company we find really interesting, they have a role we find interesting. Mm-hmm. And with your experience within branding, one of the things we're really curious about is when you look at Kvadrant Consulting,
right,
and just get the feeling in the office. I mean, you've been here not more than half an hour.
Right.
Jeppe, maybe you've seen the website. From a brand professor or branding professor, what's the smell of Kvadrant? How would you describe it?
What a knuckleball question! What a knuckleball question! I wasn't prepared on that one. Well, okay. Quadrant. Well, I think that brings me to geometry. And I think, okay. So I kind of love these 2x2 matrices, right? You have a framework, and it's like 4 squares, and that helps you. That organizes things. You can be in one position, and typically you go from one position to another position. I mean, current position to the aspired position. So I think that is probably part of the name. And I think that is a good name for what you're doing. For what I understand, you help companies to grow. You organize, you make things more effective, more efficient, streamline, and so forth. So I think actually it's a well-chosen name.
Well, thanks.
I like it.
Have I ever told you the story of how the name came about?
Nope.
So when Thomas and I started the company,
right,
we actually had a different name back then. Okay. It was called Ignite. We had to come up with a name when we started it, so we just said, let's find something, call it Ignite. Mm-hmm. There was just a big problem. Every time someone would search for Ignite, either on LinkedIn or even go to Google, you can't rank on Ignite. There's too much stuff that's called Ignite. So a few months in, we have to change the name.
Well, there you
the question is just, what do we change it to? So we actually hired an agency. So you guys help us with a name, come up with some suggestions, went to a meeting there, and they came up with all kinds of names that almost had too much sort of meaning in them. They would come up with the Greek word for change,
right?
And it didn't smell right. Like it didn't sit right. A lot of these names that they came up with. And then Thomas and I had a call on the way back. What are we gonna do? There's none of these names that we like. And then exactly like you say. We said, well, what's the thing in consulting? We want to smell like consulting.
Right.
There's something about the 2x2.
Yeah.
There's something about the squares.
Right.
And we just said, look, I wonder if Kvadrant, square in Danish is available. We checked it. Hey, it's available.dk. And that's the name.
That reminds me, I mean, there is a great marmalade in the States called Schmucker.
Schmucker.
And their slogan is, with a name like that, it got to be good.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Then afterwards, we had to come up with, so we couldn't, if someone asked, like, why that, we wanted a different story.
Yeah.
So we said, okay, what could be the story here? And then most people know the octant, the sextant, seafaring tools. And there was one before that called the Quadrant.
Yeah, okay.
That was the very early, the first version of these tools here. And we had a whole story around how navigation towards growth and stuff, but we've dropped that story over the years. Yeah. Well, thanks for that. Another thing that we're really curious about, Jeppe and I, we work most with our sales organizations.
Yeah.
A little bit in marketing in terms of how do we organize this, roles and responsibilities and stuff. One of the things I don't know that much about is branding. And I think that's why seeing some of the stuff from your book and what you've written as well, I thought was really helpful, because it was simple ways of explaining branding.
Right.
And it also, I think, took branding to a different level in terms of it's not just colors and fonts and CVIs, but it's at the heart of business.
Right.
And something that I at least wanted to hear you about is, what's has been the evolution of branding over the years?
I think if I may start, I think one reason why I wrote a book is because the evolution has been focused very much on product brands.
Right.
Now, I think if you look around, especially in business to business, there's always a mother, right? There's a mom. And thank you, Mom. Now, the mother brand is quite often neglected because it's big. It might have several different divisions, and so forth. So it's easier to do a good product brand is not easy. Not easy. But you have one unique selling proposition. You have one brand you can focus, right? But when you're going to talk about an entire organization, this is actually rather challenging. And I think if you think about the story, maybe you heard the story about the nearsighted men trying to describe an elephant. Have you heard that one? Like three nearsighted people, and they walk up to an elephant, and one is kind of grabbing the trunk, and he says, well, I think it's a big branch. And then there is somebody else stumbling into one of the legs, and he says, it's probably what do you say?
The trunk.
Trunk, thank you. And then somebody else is pulling the tail. This must be a rope. It's all very funny, isn't it? But now, if I would ask people, and of course I do, and listen to what executive teams and others, when they speak about their corporate brand or the organizational brand, if you prefer, people say, well, what is it? What are we talking about? What is the corporate brand all about? And some say, as you said, well, it's the name. Yeah, we started with Kvadrant. We talk about the name. And it is important. The logotype is also very important. So yes, it is a correct answer. Somebody else might say, well, it's all about trust. It's about relations. And I would say, yes, you're right. Then again, HR might say, well, it's the culture, how we work, how we behave, and what attitudes we have. The engineering department, the strategy guys, they say, well, this is all about what do we know better than others? What's our core competences? And as you can hear, these answers are correct, but you do not see the totality. You don't see the entire organism, right? So I think that is actually what drove me to start looking into the corporate brand. And that's, That's the driving force, and I think that's super important.
And you wrote this book, The Brain Matrix. Why? What made you write that book and spend the time doing that?
Well, actually started out exactly driven by this, I think sometimes frustration really, because when I worked and I taught branding courses, I tried to apply different frameworks, and they were all great frameworks for product brands. And then trying to apply them to a corporate brand, there was something missing. So I tried to, refine some of these frameworks, and the result was really, I solved one problem and created 2 new ones. And then I said, I have to rethink. I have to restart. And I went back to one of the experience I had when I still was a PhD, right? And I was working with a company, Nicorette, the chewing gum, the nicotine chewing gum, and they were launching the brand, and I was, very happy to be invited to be part of that. That was my first consultancy project, and also a very important part of my understanding and research. But what happened was they, or rather I should say we created a brand. We asked the consumers, here's a product, what are your needs and wants, right? So, and they answered, the market answered, well, we would like it to be green, it should be friendly, it should be trendy. And we did exactly what the market wanted us to do. And then we communicated, and they were, of course, very happy. Now, the problem was the organization was not happy. They were completely lost, and they said, what has happened? What have you done with our brand? We don't recognize ourselves anymore. And there was a complete divide that opened up, where the organization almost felt that somebody had kidnapped their brand, right? And felt that now we're in the Coca-Cola business. I thought we were a serious company, and some of the researchers actually left. And I was standing there as a young researcher in my salad days. And I said, this was not what I intended.
What happened here?
What happened, right? That was not my intention.
Yeah.
And then I started to say, well, what have we forgotten? And after a conversation with one of the researchers, he said, Mats, listen, this is a great organization, and we are, having a big fight against smoking. We are on a crusade against smoking. And I said, now what's that? I hadn't heard that before. But that was actually the purpose. And then I started to say, if you're going to build a corporate brand, you need to consider what's our purpose, what engages us, the culture, how do we work and behave, and what are our attitudes, and what do we do better than others? So actually, those 3 questions is actually the foundation in my matrix, which actually kind of connects the organization with the inside is connected with the outside. Yeah.
I think that's super, super interesting, Mats. When you're talking to leaders, brand leaders, executive leaders, and so forth, you did that, if I may say, a fair amount of years ago. You do it today.
Sure.
Have you seen a difference in their understanding of the importance of branding? Does that make any sense? Do leaders understand how important the brand is and how they should perceive their brand as part of the business or as the business?
Well, it's difficult to generalize, of course, but I would say that in some organizations, it comes natural. I mean, they all know why they are there. They all know what's the value proposition. They know what kind of relations they would like to form with different stakeholders. They know very well that this is our position and we have to protect it, They know that. And there are some ideas that actually comes with the organizations, right? And then I think things are good. But you also find organizations that actually view branding and marketing as something that the marketing department is responsible for, right? And when times are hard, it's quite often you say, okay, let's save some costs, and then they turn and look at the marketing about, let's cost something that is not business critical. I think you heard that and seen that many, many times, which I think is probably very, very unfortunate. And so I think all business leaders understand reputation, and that's interesting. Reputation, but that's the outcome, right? The reputation, the good name and reputation, why people actually come to the company, why they recommend the company, is a result of a process where you actually first understand yourself and what you promise, then you talk about it, you communicate it, and then with time you will have a reputation, right? So leaders understand reputation. They do, and they understand why it's critical. They do not necessarily understand how it comes about, and I think this is what my book is about, really.
That's super interesting, and I guess one of the key points that at least I hear there is the difference between understanding business critical versus not perceiving it as business critical.
That's right.
It seems like it's one of those major sort of misconceptions that there can be for leaders, executive leaders, CEOs even. That really changes that.
Something that I found really interesting in your framework, and it's because whenever you see these kinds of things, you sort of try to apply it. At least I do to what's top of mind here. Is these connections between the different dimensions that you have. What I translated, one of the things too was, wow, I'm dealing with a company here whose value proposition on their offerings is all about efficiency, agile, these kinds of things. But the organization and the culture there, they have extremely complex, cumbersome work processes where everything takes ages. And I just thought it was so interesting that I actually went out afterwards and addressed it to the company in that way. There's a mismatch between what you're actually going to the market with and how you're running your business. And that resonated really well with them. So I thought that's one of the powerful things in here. But I could also imagine, hearing you explain this example that you had before, that it's really complex to get all these different dimensions to align. So,
well, I mean,
how do you do that?
That is the challenge. I mean, what you really want, and I think the title of my book is The Brand Matrix, but the subtitle is Corporate Brand Leadership Starts from the Inside. And I think that's a big message, really, because, I mean, if you start from the inside, you need to bring your organization with you so they understand who are we, where do we come from, and what do we stand for? What's our aspired position? I mean, all leaders listening to this will nod and say, yes, that is true. Now, I think the challenge really here is to say, okay, if I will run through, and I mean, I don't know if this will work, but let's try it. Let me give it a try. Okay, I'm crazy now. Okay, I'm off the chart.
Go.
I'm off the chart.
Let's go.
Unplugged. Mats Urde unplugged. All right. Okay. Now, if you imagine a 3x3 matrix, okay, and we start down to the left, what engages us? Okay, that's down in the organization. And if we jump up to the middle square and say, so what do we promise? And then we go further up to the right corner. What's our aspired position? So what engages us? What do we promise? What's our aspired position? That makes sense, right? They are connected. They are all connected. Volvo would probably say Volvo for life, and then the position is something about, leadership, thought leader in safety or something like that. And, the purpose might be, go to zero accidents as fast as possible. All right, so we have that 3 questions, right? And if we then jump down to the foundation internally, the question is, what do we do better than others? What are our competences? And then we go back to the central square. What do we promise? We always return to the promise, right? And then we jump up, and then we come to, so what do we offer? What's our value proposition? And again, you can see a connection. We know something, we promise something, and we can offer something. That's logic, right? And that's competition, really. And then if we continue, stay with me, and then you say culture. That's again down in the organization. How do we work? How do we behave? And what are our attitudes? And remember, now when the promise is said, what do we promise? What do we promise? Because this is a we brand, right? It's the organization that is part of the brand. So culture, promise, and then relationship. What kind of relationship would we like to have? Now that's interaction. And the last path here in the framework, you go to the middle, out to the right, and you say, okay, what's our personality? If you would describe a brand and its personality, using human traits, right? How would we do that? And then what would that person promise? And then how can we recognize that promise? What's the expression? And expression could, of course, be the name, the logotype, the type of communication and design and so forth. Now, what I just did now, I actually walked through the matrix. So it's 9 questions. They're all interlinked. And if you can answer these questions, you have a very good understanding of what your brand stands for and its identity.
Super good explanation. Question: how could this be used if you need to do a major transformation of your business? Let me give you an example.
Sure.
Fujifilm used to be, film. We developed that. Find out maybe there's not that big of a market. We need to change the business.
Right.
What's our unique capabilities?
Right.
We got something in film.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start from that square and start then, I guess, looking at the other squares and figuring out how do we need to change the business if that's the capability we want to build on to get into medical film, for example.
Yeah.
Have you seen those kind of examples? It strikes me as such a good framework
for
for starting to figure out how we need to transform our business if we see, the market we thought were there isn't there anymore, or the position we used to take is gone.
Yeah, that's a great example. And the answer to your question, have I seen it? Absolutely. And I think the matrix can be used as an analytical tool, a toolbox for management. So now we can take an example. It could be Fujifilms, or it could be, if I may return to the Volvo, because an easy example. Volvo has been doing cars for a long time, right? And now people would like electric cars. Okay, so they would like the value proposition. They would like to offer nice electrical Volvo cars. So what they need to do is to back down to their promise and then back further down into the core competences and grow those resources, capabilities, right? And that's one path of the strategy. Another example is IKEA, and their business model has been under pressure because people are now looking more on the question of sustainability. So what they needed to do was actually to kind of nudge their identity, and what they did was actually to add one criteria for every new product they produce, namely sustainability. It used to be, nice design, good price, functionality, and now, whoops, sustainability. And that is also described, is the case in my book, describe how management actually worked with that. I mean, remember, IKEA wants to remain IKEA, but their business model is changed, their offering is also changed. I mean, they need to adapt. The only constant we have is change.
Super interesting. And you're already mentioning some of the brands in the book here now. If you had to give some, what brands have you seen that do it well, where you find that it's pretty aligned, these different things?
Well, I mean that's...
Besides Kvadrant, of course.
Well, besides Kvadrant, of course. But I think when I look at... there are different types of brands that I admire. I think actually consultant... Would you say that isn't it wonderful to almost fall in love with the brand you're working with? I think it's sometimes almost necessary.
Yeah.
Really to say, well, I really, really want to help these guys.
Yep.
And now, okay, beside that, okay, falling in love, all right, maybe that's too big of a word, but Trek bikes.
Trek bikes.
Yeah, I mean those were the inventors of the mountain bike, and that's the biggest producer of bicycles in the world.
Yeah.
In the States, so I worked with them, and what actually made me so fascinated about Trek bike was their storytelling. They had an amazing way to engage people to tell their stories. So I went to Chicago and then to Milwaukee, and I met with the company. And when I saw the company and how they worked, I really felt, it starts from the inside. In their office there was, as you might suspect, a lot of bikes. During the lunch break, people actually out biking. And I was there, and then a guy came up and he said, "Have you tested our trail?" And I said, "No. Would you like to?" Yes. Please. and then this guy said, "Gear him up." And I got all this nice Trek bike gear on, and a beautiful bike, and I was out biking, and then his name was Chad. And then afterwards I said, "Thank you very much, Chad." And then I asked somebody, who's this guy? He's the financial officer of the company. Now that's cool.
That's cool.
I think that is so very, very cool. Now that is something that I admire, and I meet this in some companies.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's beautiful.
Yep.
And
I think the whole cycling community. There's this brand in Denmark that wasn't here a few years ago, Paranormal.
Yeah.
Which one of our clients, she's really into cycling and absolutely loves that brand.
Yeah.
Because I think they nailed it on the head with, cyclists are not normal. the hardcore cyclists, what they have to endure, the kind of food they eat. Being on a mountain all day.
Right.
And I think they nailed that as a position there and as an insight that there's a community thing.
Yeah.
For cycling, and it permeates through the organization as well. That not normal thing.
But I think that if there is a passion in a company,
exactly,
it's good.
Yeah.
I mean, Bang Olufsen. Now we're in Denmark. I need to mention that. I mean, that is the design and the quality of the product is amazing. Yeah. Sometimes out of budget, but beyond that, it's a great product. Okay, so. And of course, I mean, also business-to-business companies. Let's not forget the business-to-business guys, because you find some of the most dedicated companies in business-to-business. And I think in business-to-business, it's almost like in a flat landscape, also a small hill is a mountain. I think there is such an amazing opportunity for business-to-business companies to do something, just something to build their brand. I think I've been part of quite a few such projects, and just small, rather more. Basic things can actually make a big difference. Yeah. Because all the parts are typically there. I mean, great product, great quality, passionate people, know-how, competences, everything is there. All the boxes are there. And if they just put it together and just tell their story.
And something that fascinates me on that is also seeing, after somebody's been doing amazing brand building for 20, 30 years, is how all of a sudden they can charge a 30, 40, 50% price premium compared to everybody else.
I know.
Based off of the brand. Obviously also amazing products and all that. And I think we've seen some examples of that, just saying, wow, this looks like a great product. Damn, it's also expensive compared to something. Another interesting topic, I think, Mats, is Martin and I have discussed this thing about research in business. Mm-hmm. We often feel like there's a lot of decisions that are made based on experiences, what people have tried before, seen before. Obviously, makes a lot of sense, user experiences and so forth.
Best practice,
but sometimes we sit with this feeling that, there's some research. Fundamentally, our knowledge about this is actually limited to what Martin has experienced at some point in some project. Looking at branding, what is some of the more sort of the newer and most interesting branding research that you've come across that actually, if you're working with branding out there, you're an executive leader. That's super interesting to know. Is there some interesting brain research?
There is, of course, tons and tons. Sometimes I think returning to the fundamental questions is actually a good thing to do, especially when everybody's running in one direction. There are of course trends in research as well, but right now we have a big trend on sustainability and be going on, and for all the good reasons, of course. We have AI coming like a tidal wave. We don't know exactly how this will affect the world yet, but I had a discussion with one company, and they spoke about how AI can be used in customer service. And then we spoke about it, and there was one example. It was a company, probably more like a luxury brand, okay? But they said, we won't do that. We will have real people. When they call us, when they talk with us, it will be real people, all right? Now, and then we came into discussion about, I think sometimes, AI, we say, okay, we can now cut costs, right? But if I would write something about AI, I would probably write, okay, how can we add value? How can we use, AI to do customer service even better? Not just cost, but actually add value. That would be one thing. And then I was actually a bit surprised because I was invited to come to speak to the University of Rome, Sapienza. That was very nice, by the way. And the topic was heritage. Now, if you think about Italy, and you think about the number of corporate brands they have with a heritage, Ferrari, they have Gucci. The number, it won't end. The list is long. Now, that is when you talk about understanding the brand is the business, right? If somebody at Mont Blanc would seriously, now that happens to be a Swiss brand, or German brand, but if somebody at Mont Blanc would seriously think that they produce pens, they would be off, right? They have not understood what the value they create. It's a symbol of something, right? So I think to understand what the value you offer is fundamental. That I think would be things that is actually very important. Yeah, those are 2 tracks that I would follow up for sure.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think most of the stuff that we are doing with AI, for example, a lot of the time, what's really, because it's so easy to put down on paper,
right,
this can reduce process by this and save some cost.
If I will write a paper that is scary, a scary one, I will write a paper about designed in Denmark, produced somewhere else. Start to think about this. Now, if you take a broader view, okay, so you have you do something very well, right? And you have those competences. You're innovative. You have the design. You have, by the way, you have the reputation, right? And then you say to yourself, well, okay, we do this. Now we can outsource this and this and that, right? And it's produced somewhere else in the world at a much lower cost. That makes a lot of business sense, right? And after a decade or so, you find yourself not understanding how the product is produced, right? Now you have cornered yourself. And the only thing you have to manage is, disconnected with the product. I'm not sure this is a good idea.
I think it's one of the books I'm reading at home is called The Man Who Broke Capitalism. It's the book about Jack Welch. Big management guru for a lot of years. The book is a little bit critical about
Okay.
him and what happened there. Basically maximizing short-term return
Right.
for the long term, because it turned out that the company in the end lost a lot of the capabilities that made it unique.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the book argues anyway, broke American capitalism in its ability to produce stuff.
Yeah, but I think I mean look at the production of chips
Yeah.
around the world. I mean that is now outsourced, and now you don't have the capability anymore. So I think that was the scary article, but maybe something for us to think about. Maybe.
I've already seen products that just says designed in Denmark, but I also bought a coffee machine the other day.
Yeah.
It says handcrafted in Holland. So
Wow.
I knew I think it was a Mocha Master or something like that. Like, I'm gonna get that one.
Right.
Yeah. And also, the reason I find what you're saying so interesting, Jeppe and I visit a lot of, we work mainly with B2B companies. So production heartland of Denmark, sometimes over in Jutland where we are from.
Right.
And it's so clear that it's a huge part of their identity too.
Right.
They have their offices just next to production.
Right.
And it's very clear when we talk to the owners of these companies, they're the ones who manage them. That's a very big thing for them, because they want to make sure that those two things are actually connected and that no one forgets,
Right.
what is it that we do here?
Right. And I think I mentioned authenticity earlier. I think that sometimes when people in organizations think about brands, they fall into the trap of thinking about Coca-Cola, which is a fine drink, of course, but it's a product brand and it's, basically marketing, right? And done by advertising agency, and what is said and shown does not necessarily need to be true. I mean, there can be Santa with reindeers coming over the sky or happy people on the beach. Okay, that works fine for that kind of product, right? But if you're talking about a business-to-business company, it has to be true. It needs to be authentic. And I think sometimes you are so close to it, you're taking the things you do very much for granted. So I think you have to kind of, open your eyes and look, what are we doing? And what makes our customers happy? How have we built our reputation? What are the promises we have kept and delivered for years and years and years? And there you go. You have a fantastic opportunity to actually build that reputation. Yeah.
One of the things that I absolutely loved when I heard it from you, because it's so applicable, you can start doing it straight away, is this idea you have of putting the brand in the room. So I just want to make sure we get that.
You
as
remember that one?
Because I love that one, because it's such a simple thing to think about, and then to do when you're in those situations where that makes sense.
Right.
And I think those are quite a lot of situations. So just like, what's the idea there?
Well, I mean, I go through the whole book, and then I came to the final chapter, and I said to myself, okay, how do I conclude this whole set? I mean, going the journey from identity to then communicating with the help of storytelling, and then building your reputation. 1, 2, 3, right? And then you say, okay, as a leader, as a manager, so what are you going to think about? What are the top things to think about? And then I recalled a senior executive from IKEA, and he said the following: when I think about when bad decisions are reached in our organization, it's because the brand was not in the room. Now, that's the origin of the thought, because if you walk in and you are reaching small or big decisions, and if you don't kind of see the totality of the brand and how it all kind of connects, decisions that might seem to be very smart, on the short run, you save cost here, you do that and that and that, and then in the long run it will come up and bite you. So if everybody in the organization, actually beyond the executive team, needless to say, but if people understand that it's all about asking yourself what helps and what hurts the brand. I think that's another brilliant rule to live by. What helps and what hurts. And if you really dumb it down and say, So what is a brand? Ultimately, a brand is a promise. And we as human beings, we understand that if you keep a promise, that's a good thing. If you break a promise, there will be backlash. We understand that. The same very basic rule applies when you're building brands, right? So if you bring the brand into room, you are actually changing the way you think of your business. So the brand is the business.
And I think I'm just being reminded again why I loved what you said there so much.
Yeah.
Because it highlights two important things for me, which is we as a small business, we're just, we're 30-something people.
Yeah.
We have to make sure everyone understands what's this promise, what's the brand here.
Right.
And then we have to make sure that we put it in the room whenever decisions are made. And I think those two things, when you said it the first time, just really clicked with me because you forget sometimes when you're making decisions, running the business, doing projects.
Absolutely.
You forget these things sometimes, but it can easily end up biting you in the ass.
Absolutely.
If you don't do it.
Absolutely. And I mean, in business to business, it's all about relations. It's all about trust. And it's actually a lot of people from, different organizations working together and meeting. And if there is disappointment or a broken promise, there will be consequences.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I think that's I was sitting at a dinner, I remember, with a company, and there was a person from procurement, and she said that we are doing these small trailers, and we have saved cost on the steel, the thickness of the steel, and the saving is 5 million a year or 10 million, I don't know. And I said, well, okay. And then a couple of years later, there was all these customer complaints because the trailers broke, and they did not, keep the quality they used to have. I mean, those are small stories, right? And I think you can think about stories when in business to business there has been a promise, or there should be a delivery or something like that, and it didn't come through. And maybe there is a problem and they didn't fix it. So to build a reputation is one thing, but it's also keeping that reputation. That's why we need to bring the brand into the room, and you have to fix things right away.
Totally, and for me, you can have the same product. I just bought some Christmas trees from a website.
Yeah,
plastic.
Okay.
Because I'm having Mexican Christmas this year, so I found a website where they actually have cactus things with Christmas lights.
Well, that's different.
Anyway, long story. But it wasn't the best quality, but neither was the promise from the website. No. So I didn't get disappointed.
No.
But if I had gone to, we're the premium providers of cactus Christmas trees and best quality, and it had come to me, the exact same product, I would have been disappointed, right?
True.
So it's that promise there that's at the heart of it, and that making sure that what you deliver actually lives up to that promise. And if that's, it's cheap, but you know what you're getting. Yeah. Or if it's the premium version of it, that really defines the experience as well.
Yep.
So what's next for Mats and for branding? Where do you see, you've written the book now. Any other thoughts that you have about the future of the discipline, some stuff you're interested in?
I like to see the framework applied.
Yeah.
I like to see things actually, how it works. To create a framework, to write, that is in itself, to me, a great experience. I wouldn't say an easy one, but it's a great experience, right? But to actually see it applied, that puts a smile on my face. So that's what I'm hoping for, to apply it, to learn more actually, because things develop all the time, and you get new examples of how things are applied. And when you hear people talk about the framework, you say, well, that's a good thought. Yes. I like that. So it kind of adds. And I find this, for instance, I've done now, I've been in Stockholm recently at the Stockholm School of Economics. I met with 25 managers and leaders, and they apply the framework. And then just listen to how they interpret things and how they kind of tweak things is absolutely amazing. is great.
Awesome. And I think as we're rounding off here, there's something. I'm not usually the most sentimental kind of guy, but when I started in Lund at the university, or had your classes, I must say I was a sales guy. I've been working with sales, commercial development. That's sort of my trade and so forth. And I don't think I ever recognized that branding was anything not done just by the marketing organization. Something with colors and fonts and stuff like that, as you said earlier. I think just this realization from your courses, from the book as well, that the brand is the business, is something I really bring with me forward. I feel like I still have a big respect for the discipline of branding. I think you said it very well recently, Martin, that I know just enough to know or to have an idea about what I don't know. But still just recognizing the importance of the brand is something that now I feel smarter because I know that at least it's super important.
But I think thank you. I mean, of course, I'm very touched to hear this, and I think that's why it's great to be a teacher. Actually, one of the most underestimated jobs in the world, right? And may I add, most underpaid as well. But having said that, I think when I speak with people with a strong background in sales, okay, for some of them, the whole area of rhetorics comes natural. If you think about it. So what did Aristotle tell us? Okay, the old guy, and he said, if you're going to convince or persuade anybody about anything, okay, universal theory now, guys, you first have to come up with arguments that are based upon facts. We call these logos argument, okay? Having done so, you need to come with arguments that are based upon your character and personality, okay? Paren, your brand's character and its personality. We call those arguments ethos, and they build trust, okay? Next, you have to find arguments that actually stirs the emotion, makes people act, decide, or buy or not buy, right? We call those arguments pathos. So if you get that into your mind, you actually have a very powerful tool. And just to test this Aristotle's theory, you can say, okay, so all right, so you have a product or a company, and if you can't explain your product, what it does or what it looks like or how it works, I walk away. This is not unusual when it comes to high-tech products, right? I walk away. Okay, let's say you manage to explain it. Okay, good. Next, if I don't trust the guys delivering it, I walk away. Right? Okay, let's say I understand, I trust, but I don't see the point. I don't see the value of it. I walk away. So, conclusion, you need to have arguments that are logos, ethos, pathos. Now, that I think when it comes to sales or any argumentation whatsoever is fundamental. And if you look at a good salesman, just listen, and I do with great interest when I see a really, really good salesman. I say, okay, it's beautiful, beautiful. Here comes the logos, here comes the ethos, and here comes the pathos. I buy it. And I just put a smile on my face.
Something I would tell any salesperson who says, I don't believe in branding.
Right.
What they should try is people who say they typically work for companies that already have a brand.
Right.
A good one.
Yeah.
What they should try is to sell without having that brand. Any one of us who's tried to go from a big company that have a well-established name, it's known for something,
right,
and then suddenly not having that anymore,
right,
will definitely feel the difference between those two.
Right. And sometimes you say a brand, I heard that from one of my colleagues, a strong brand is half the sales cycle, right? So that's a good argument.
It's true, and one thing I tried that I think is 1.5 years ago or so is it's obviously just a part of the branding discipline, but reading a positioning statement, and generally, if you read that and it's well crafted, I was about to write outreach messages. I was like, what do I write in here? What the fuck? And I was like, no, I'll just look at some of the work that was done here. Like, I read some of the brand work, I read the positioning work. Like, oh damn, this is easy. Because looking at that, I could just easily formulate, these outreach messages, why this might be relevant for customers, why buy it, based on Paz's logos, Igor's kind of thing. It all just became so clear just from reading the position, and that was sort of a revelation for me. If I understand this better, and I think sometimes you can also do it the other way around.
Right.
Listen to the really good salespeople if you're in doubt, sort of how to do at least components of the branding. I think could be the full thing,
but I think you're onto something there for sure, Jeppe. I mean, positioning and identity, they come together like this, right? I mean, they are really closely connected, and that reminds me of this story from Alice in Wonderland, right? So Alice, she comes up and there is the big owl, and Alice, she asks the owl, what way should I take? And the owl asks, so where would you like to go? And Alice says, well, I don't really know. And then the owl says very wisely, in that case, it doesn't matter what way you take. You see? And I think, if you're a business and you don't know what is the aspired position, you're lost.
Right.
And that, I think, especially in the markets where things are changing, everything is moving, you got to know, where are we going? What's our aspired position? And by the way, you have to bring people along. And I think that's also one of the advice in my book. Help people internally first to see and want to reach the position. That's important. And then you start to communicate. Super important.
Makes sense, especially in relation to all these different things that have to come together in your model. You really see the importance of having position clear. Because otherwise, how am I going to align the culture, the people, the capabilities, everything around getting to that destination?
Yeah, and then when we're working with the framework in different workshops and so on, I think the first thing that comes to mind when the question is, okay, so what is your aspired position? Okay, we would like to be our customer's first choice. Now that's a pretty good answer, but I typically say, wouldn't most companies like to have that position? Is that a very distinctive, unique position to have? Not really. Can you be more specific, right? And once you kind of turn it around and find something that is actually very graspable, maybe even like a metaphor. So working with this company, a super high-tech company doing self-driving capabilities for cars, Selvsagt. And they were struggling. First of all, their product is so complicated. You have to be a technical physician to actually understand what they're doing. Quant physics and so on is very, very high level. But after some discussion, they came up with this idea that we are the guardian angel. Right. They're the guardian angel. Their software helps, to guard persons in the car to travel more safely. The guardian angel. And suddenly, this is what we promise, and this is who we like to be, and this is how we would like to be seen in the market. And suddenly, their business and the purpose, what they're doing and everything, became much, much more
That's
clear.
super interesting.
It is.
That's super interesting. With this thing of, because I've always thought about positioning as, what's that spot in the market? How do we want people to perceive us? But I think what really, really rings true with me is that it has to be something that people can relate to as well and understand. Because otherwise, how will I align all these other things around that position?
Right.
Last question that I have. What's the deal with these horses? You have boats. You like to sail. What's up with the horses?
Well,
what's that thing?
Okay. So, first of all, I have a beautiful wife, and she loves Icelandic horses. And she goes to Iceland every year, and she brings home all these nice photos. Okay? And
I thought you were going to say she brings home all these horses.
No. Actually, I did.
You did?
I did. But so I went riding, believe it or not. I'm a slow starter, late starter, I have to say. I have never been on a horse, but then I, did some training 15 times on a horse back home in Sweden. And then we went to Iceland and we went out riding. And that went well. I did what one would call an Iceland air, you fall off. Wee-hoo! But I survived. And I was so taken by it. I mean, typically the sports I do is like, Kevlar, aluminum, speed, that kind of material. Now, here was an actual live animal. And, those beasts, they have the mind of their own, actually, if you didn't know. And then when you connect with them, I was so fascinated. So last evening, before we went home from that riding in Iceland, I asked the person who owned the farm, I said, what kind of horse should I have if I ever would buy one? And they pointed at the gray one, small, fat gray one. And then
don't ask why.
and then actually he said that's horse. She knows everything, so you just sit and she will tell you how to do.
Start a horse.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and then on the plane home, I knocked on my wife's shoulder, and I said, Ulla, I'm going to buy a horse. And she didn't faint, but almost. And then in the car from Copenhagen back home, I called the farm and I said, okay, I'd like to buy this horse. And they said, she's not for sale. And I said, everything on Iceland is for sale. And they agreed.
How many years ago is this?
15 years.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's a crazy story. No, but it was a small, not a fancy horse at all. She was small, gray and a bit fat, but wonderful horse.
Sounds like a good horse.
Wonderful horse. So I'm stuck.
Thanks very much for that, Mats. And thank you so much for coming by to talk more about branding. Give us some insights into the brand matrix.
This has been such a nice conversation.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I really enjoy it.
It's been really valuable for us as well.
Yeah.
What I really like about it, and it's something that is practically applicable.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It isn't. Obviously, there's a lot of experience and research behind it. A lot of thinking going into it as well, but it's something that is practically applicable, and I really enjoy that.
I think it's a bit like when we're talking about things like this, I think people listening to this, they have experience. They know this. They have heard all these questions many times, but I think it's almost like in class, Jeppe, I sometimes say there's you have knowledge, small islands of knowledge, but if you connect them and maybe bring them into some sort of order, you put them into flow, then a different picture emerges. So I think that's what we're doing, actually. And some advice is super simple, really. What helps, what hurts, easy. Keep promises, easy, and so forth. But put it into the big picture. Now that's where leadership comes in.
Right.
Thank you so much, Mats.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you have any questions or requests, you can always contact us at info@kvadrant.dk. If you want to know even more about Kvadrant Consulting, please be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to our newsletter, or go to our website kvadrant.dk.